Hi, everyone. I'm Dan McDermott. Welcome to the McDermott Report. Joining me from New York is Alan Furstenberg. Welcome, Alan.
Hey, Dan.
We were actually going to be early for like the first time ever, and then something screwed up. So, anyway, I had to redo the post. All right, so our first story is Google Plus, the web preview has been tweaked again. I understand.
Well, it's not so much tweaked again. It's, they're continuously trying to actually make it usable, and they've added some things that help in that aspect.
Which would be?
So previously, in order to plus one a comment, you needed to do things like um, click 3 times and finally see a plus one and click on it. Now, when you hover over a comment, you'll have the ability to plus one it. The really kind of Androidy but still very obnoxious timestamp on the post that would say something like 3 minutes or whatever has now been replaced with a full date and time. And one of the changes they made on reporting post abuse, even though the post the menu item on the post was marked report abuse, when you clicked on it and it said, do you really want to report this as spam? Since a lot of people were reporting things that weren't spam, that really came across as kind of ignorant and stupid and freaking useless. So they've now added an additional selector that once you say report this, you can give a little more information about why you're reporting it. So 3 very welcome changes, but no, not a huge deal, let's be honest here.
Yeah. Okay. Does it suck less? I'm not a fan.
Well, marginally.
Okay. All right. So,
It still pretty much sucks, but I can't even say that because I never really thought that it sucked. I thought that the fact that they took away important features that have yet to return, that they clearly showed an ignorance for how people use the system, and in doing this, they didn't even give anything that people have been looking for years. That I think is kind of rude, but I wouldn't have said that it sucked.
okay. So sucks is too strong.
Yeah, it was kind of bland. It was kind of a so what.
Okay.
This keeps the so what going, but at least they fix some of the issues.
Okay. All right. So next is YouTube has killed the ability. It was a little known feature. We're just sort of now you're going to be like, oh man, I wish I knew about that. I had heard about this. You could record a video directly from your webcam, but I don't think anybody did that.
Well, apparently very few people did it anyway.
Why would they kill it?
The biggest reason why they would kill it is because it required Flash.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was dependent on technology that sucked.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But you can still use your cam to go to YouTube Live, correct?
Well, I mean, if you start up YouTube, if you can do YouTube Live and you start it up correctly, then yeah, sure. But that either requires additional software on your end, or it requires using Hangout on Air. And it still means that you can use your camera to record things using whatever program you have on your machine.
Right. Which is probably superior to whatever YouTube had because it was custom for that camera.
Sure. Well, it's not even custom for your camera. I mean, Windows has something, Apple has something that lets you record videos. So those are, probably fine. They're adequate. They're probably no better than what YouTube was offering. I think the biggest downside to this is that people who were using a Chrome OS device are now going to be missing out because there is no native there is no native video. Well, maybe there is now that I think about it. Okay, I take that part back.
Okay. All right. So there you go. You can't do this anymore, but you were doing it anyway. All right, Facebook. This is one of your pet. This probably is the reason we met. I think this was one of these topics was the reason you came on my show to scream at me for the very first time.
Yes, that's because you were wrong then, and you're still wrong about this issue.
Years later. Okay, so Facebook has made changes to its real name policy enforcement process. So what is this about?
So basically, Facebook currently enforces, probably in some ways almost stricter than Google ever enforced, what they refer to as a real name policy. So people who were using pseudonyms on Facebook for whatever reason were not allowed to do so. And quite a number of people have been reported on this and have been terminated from Facebook. Facebook's solution to this for a while was, well, if you can prove you are who you are by showing us a government-issued ID, that'll be good. We'll let you. This still ignored people who were using a pseudonym for personal safety reasons, who were using a pseudonym for professional reasons, who did not have government-issued ID, at least not government-issued ID that showed their legitimate name. So now they've loosened it a little bit, basically saying that in order for people to report your name, they need to give more information. So they can't just say, hey, that's not their name. They need to give an explanation. And when defending your name, you're now allowed to actually give an explanation in reply. Furthermore, they're kind of being a lot looser about exactly what ID they will accept. So it's not just government issued ID, it's, just show us something that actually has this name on it. All of these are nice steps in the right direction, but they're still wrong. Because fundamentally, there's, the only person who has a right to decide what your name is you. And Facebook is violating this concept again. So kudos to Facebook for trying to do the right thing, but they still fail.
Okay, what's the best argument for requiring a real name?
There is no good argument for requiring a real name.
Okay.
I'm sorry, there isn't. I mean, you want me to make up some bullshit reason, I can make up a bullshit reason, but there is no good argument for requiring a real name.
It would all be hypocritical because they all want musicians and actors to create pages, right? And a presence on social media. That's what makes them cool. And if they're going to allow a rapper to, to say 50 Cent, how can they not allow you to say prisoner? That's not fair.
That's 50 Cent. And
50 cents.
They would make the argument that those are pages, those aren't people. And that still remains a bogus argument. There is no legitimate reason to require people to use a name that they don't use. I don't understand why they're so hell-bent on trying to do so.
Okay. I remember, I don't know if it was on TV or but the dumb white girl was like, I just love 50 cents. Whiter than I am. Okay. All right. Next is a new Chrome extension kills Facebook ads, sponsored posts, and stuff from people you don't follow. I saw this. I forget who shared this or where, but it's a Chrome extension. I linked to it. I forget what it's called, but I tried it, and it works pretty well, I think. But this, of course, would be a disaster for revenue for Facebook on desktop. It doesn't work on mobile. And more of the traffic is on mobile. And then I heard someone say, enjoy it until they get a cease and desist letter. But I don't know what will be different about this versus a regular ad blocker, which makes every website angry. But
I don't know what's different about. I mean, the technology-wise, the biggest difference is that this is accessing Facebook's API in some way to get a list of your friends. So it knows who your friends are, so that it can get rid of posts that are not from your friends.
Now, that's in theory, the case, they could do a cease.
At least that's what I'm assuming. I can't figure out how else they would get a list of your friends, so they could just show those.
You don't think they could just be scraping it and know something says sponsored post or the text under there, one of your friends plus one this, and they would know to
Well,
get rid of
except for
that.
the fact that just because your friend plus one it, even if it's by another one of your friends, it will, they're saying that they will mask it. So they're not presumably looking for, I mean, maybe they are looking for the sponsored post word, but they're also in some way, they make it sound like it knows who your friends are and are just showing you those. Now, whether that's really what it's doing or not, I don't know. But that's kind of what it sounds like.
Okay, so we'll see. I'll look at it. I'll try to do a bigger test. This was print week, so I didn't have a lot of time. Um, but I want to do a test. Open Facebook up on 2 different windows and see what the behavior is. But it'll probably be a moot point. I'm sure they're going to kill it somehow if there's a way, if they can legally, threaten them.
Oh, they can threaten them. Whether they can legally threaten them is another story.
Yeah. Okay, so I know like Mohammed Mansour did a thing and they killed it real quick to export your friends and find them on Google Plus. Okay, so next is Telestream, which makes Wirecast, which is a software switcher that allows you to combine various video sources, audio, photos. They've come up with an iOS app, and it goes straight to YouTube Live. So now you can do YouTube Live from your phone. I linked to the app. This is iOS only. They say they're working on an Android version, and Craig did it, and it looked pretty good for coming from a phone. Now that was over Wi-Fi, but I know you saw part of it. What do you think about that?
Kudos to Telestream for doing what apparently Google is completely and unable, incompetent, and able to do.
Isn't there an Android thing that goes to
No.
YouTube Live? There isn't one?
No, there is an Android thing that will that will basically broadcast your game stream and include in that video, but that's not a live stream video.
It's okay. It's for the gaming, YouTube gaming. It's
Right,
not.
it's for YouTube game, not for YouTube Live.
Okay. All right. So, but this is great, and this isn't something you're going to do shows on necessarily. And this is Facebook just opened up this kind of feature, and I don't know if I know it's on.
Everybody has this feature. That's why it doesn't make any sense that Google is so late to the game.
Now,
Everybody is doing this. And no, you're not going to necessarily have, professionals using it. But I got to tell you something. The BBC uses Periscope. All over the place, the BBC uses Periscope. And that's the freaking BBC.
yeah, they're kind of a big deal.
So if you're going to use it, you're using the same software the BBC is using.
I can see this being cool if you're like for personal use, just if you're at a parade and your kid's in it, or the school band or the football game. There's going to be a lot of that. I'm going to do a test to see. The logical use is you're at a forest fire, or there's a meteorite that just landed, or whatever is going on. That's just you happen to be in the right or the wrong place at that time. But I'm going to do a test this weekend to compare Facebook and YouTube Live to see with the apps on iOS to see which one, what the difference is. But it is 720p. I guess it would go down below that. Theoretically, I would think it would dumb you down if necessary because your connectivity was so low. But this is great. This is what we wanted when Hangouts first started. That's what we all wanted. We wanted because I remember the Arab Spring was just starting, and that was one example I used, where you were getting this video that was questionable, like is it really from this protest or not? But with this kind of thing, theoretically you could find out where the person through geolocation or whatever. I don't know, maybe, but nothing beats live. I remember, recorded is great and better quality, but just like I remember Tiananmen Square and the first Gulf War when they were, it was live on CNN. You're watching the sky light up. Nothing beats live. It's interesting either way, but there's nothing like watching Bernard Shaw in Tiananmen Square. when it's happening, even if the resolution isn't superior. But I think that the video that I linked to here that Craig did is superior in quality to anything that CNN put out for Tiananmen Square or for the first Gulf War. So it's certainly usable. It's not like Craig's using a red camera, but the audio is great. But he had a thing like a little mixer that connects to hang on, you're anyway. He had a mixer that made the audio better. All right, next is Google's CEO says, let's not let fear defeat our values. I don't have the link to the Zuckerberg similar comments, but this is at a time, I guess this is sort of, there's a bit of Islamophobia going on, and he wanted to sort of address that. And he's from India, and he's only been here 20 years. And he may actually be the Indian who has a thicker accent than Sreek, our friend. We may have found him, but he's a super smart guy, super nice guy, very popular. And he was just trying to say, hey, but what do you think? What do you think? What was your take on this, Alan?
The reason why I suggested we include this story is because I think this is top officials at major tech companies, Facebook, Google, Microsoft has made similar statements, coming out loud and clear and saying that this level of intolerance that seems to be growing is about the only thing that shouldn't be tolerated.
Okay. You think that the reaction to what Donald Trump said he would ban all Muslim immigrants, visas for Muslims. Do you think if he had said from these specific countries in North Africa, Syria, the Middle East, the reaction would have been different and more justifiable? Or do you think, let's just bring him in?
Well, I think it depends on which countries he might have specified.
If he had said like Libya, Syria, obviously, that sort of thing. I think that would have gone over better. They just
I think it might have gone over. Well, no, I don't think it would have gone over much better at all, because it continues to show an ignorance of what the problem is.
Which is?
The problem is that you've got people who are being persecuted in the countries that you just named, who are attempting to flee that persecution, and then we are saying, "No, we don't really want you here. We don't care. Go ahead and get killed."
Well, some of let's contrast San Bernardino with Paris. San Bernardino was a mixture of a U.S. citizen born in the United States, college educated, and then he was. Now the latest is that they believe that he was self-radicalized, right, with these websites.
So
he got a wife, a fellow jihadist from Saudi Arabia, and then Paris.
Sorry. Repeat that. Where was she from?
She was in Pakistan. Was she Saudi? I can't remember.
Yeah, she's Saudi.
Okay, so she's Saudi, and she was in.
So, do you really think Trump would have proposed a ban on visas from one of our biggest allies?
Oh, I think so. Trump? Yeah. Sure, he just said no Muslims. That's Saudi Arabia's fairly Muslim.
That's true.
Right there in the Stone Age.
So and the Paris attacks are from where were they from?
Some were Belgium, some were, I don't know all the nationalities.
Yeah. So let's see.
Some were, I guess it was a mixture, right?
Belgium. That'll go over well. That'll be effective.
Anyway, I guess you legally could. The president does have a lot of executive power over immigration.
Sure, there is no question that the president has the authority to ban visas from specific countries. As has been pointed out in the past, this has been done any number of times against any number of countries. That is unquestionable.
Japan, Germany in World War II, Iran by Jimmy Carter. It's clearly, yeah.
Yeah. Cuba. It's clear that we have done this in the past, and this is not exact. That part is not a legal barrier. What Trump proposed, however, is just stupid. And I would also point out that blocking visas from specific countries makes sense in the context of a clear and justifiable reason for doing so. Arbitrarily blocking countries makes no sense whatsoever. Jimmy Carter did it from Iran for specific reasons, and it was part of declaring all diplomats from Iran persona non grata. It was part of a series of sanctions that the U.S. was imposing. It was part of a number of other things. It wasn't just we don't want Iranians in this country.
Yeah, but the executive branch clearly has a lot of authority, just like as we saw the opposite with Cuba, where the administration unilaterally decided that they would allow a broader range of visitors from the U.S. to go to Cuba than had previously been allowed, as long as you don't call it tourism. It's a cultural exchange or business, that sort of thing. And so we danced that game. But I think Sundar is super smart, very well liked, and certainly qualified to weigh in on this as someone who came here from a very different culture, although a shared language, and has done very well and has contributed, as much as he's received. So, any thoughts on this? Pam in Menifee joins us, and also in Cincinnati, Ohio, is Kevin Bryan. What do you think, Kevin?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
We're talking about banning the Muslims.
Yeah. I guess the biggest problem is that Trump is running as a true populist, and the problem is that the idea of a temporary ban or on Muslims entering the country is actually the last poll that I saw done by it in America. I hesitate to quote that, so I need to, before I say numbers, let me look.
It was a
them up
lot
again.
more popular than Trump is. In the Republican Party, it was well over half supported it, and it was a higher percentage than support Trump. The idea is actually more popular than Trump is.
That was
among all voters and among Republican voters.
Yeah, that was actually the poll I saw, that the idea of banning Muslims was actually a little bit more popular than his poll numbers. So that's really what the problem is. People are following with people have those ideas to begin with.
And I wouldn't think you would have had a very different result if you had polled right after 9/11. Probably you'd have more support than you did after Bernardino in Paris. Right after something happens, most people don't really understand the issues. They don't really follow the news. A quick perusal of your Facebook feed will show you how ignorant most people are. Pam, what do you think? Pam's in the Christmas spirit.
I am in the Christmas spirit. Can you hear me okay?
Your volume's a little low, but you're very clear. And you look beautiful with your Santa hat.
Thanks. Let me see what I can do about increasing the volume.
You sound fine, Pam.
Do I? Okay. Oop. I have a new microphone, so I'm trying it out. And also a new webcam.
Hello.
Anyway, the lighting source leaves something to be desired, but I'll work on that. Banning all Muslims. There are an awful lot of Muslims already here, and I don't think the general population understands that the United States has had a refugee importation policy for the last 30 years almost. And they've imported anywhere between 50 and 70,000 people every single year since then. We haven't had any foreign-born, refugee imported terrorist attacks ever. So I'm not quite sure what his policy or what his thoughts they're not based in any fact that I can find.
I think it's summed up. It's a gut reaction. It is a populist thing, and it's not fascism. If you look, Vox, that wonderful website, did an in-depth thing where they actually, because people were calling Donald Trump a fascist, and they interviewed experts on fascism, and they all agreed that he's not a fascist at all. He's just a populist, maybe a demagogue, whatever you want to call him. But he has a lot of support. I was talking to a guy in the grocery store tonight, and he's a friend of mine, white guy, like mid-50s probably, and he said, "What do you think?" I said, "I don't know. What do you think?" And he told me he liked Trump, but it was almost like he was getting ready to tell like a offensive joke when someone looks over their shoulder first, and he like whispered, "I like Trump," like he's embarrassed to admit it, but when he gets in that polling booth, but he is definitely a populist. He's, and it's kind of summed up with Ted Cruz had this great line. I'm not a big Ted Cruz fan, but he's a great debater. He's very smart. He said his dad or someone told him that not every Democrat is a horse thief, but every horse thief is a Democrat. And it was a partisan joke in a Republican primary debate, obviously, and you could reverse that in a Democrat debate to say Republicans, but that's what most people are thinking. It seems like all these terrorists are Muslims. Of course, they gloss over the Planned Parenthood guy, right, who's not Muslim. But anyway, any other thoughts on this? And we can move. I mean, I don't know. We've talked about this several times, I think. All right, so next is Chipotle.
It's going to be a long campaign year. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. I think it's normally about April when we have a nominee on either side, right? March, April, May, something like that. Okay, so I saw this headline. It was just too good not to include. This is about Chipotle's stuff. They're getting in trouble for, I think it was salmonella at first and then norovirus. If you don't know what norovirus is, it's called wintertime vomiting bug in England, if that gives you a clue. I think it's one of those things where you don't know which end to aim because it can come out both ends. But it's rough. And the headline is, was Chipotle too busy avoiding the fake dangers of GMOs to focus on actual food safety? And then I know you guys want to get into this, but I would point out that focusing on like fresh, local, non-factory farms, all this stuff sounds great, but when one of the first fast food chains in America was White Castle, and they make I think they were the origin of the slider type burger, the little tiny burgers, and then there was several knockoffs, including like White Tavern or something, and this was following a lot of controversy in the fast food or in restaurant in the food business, and so they did the whole stainless steel thing and the Castle thing to make it look white and really clean. And they, in the first one, they used fresh hamburger, but then when they expanded, they went to frozen patties for safety because they couldn't maintain the safety with a bunch of different outlets using fresh hamburger. So I don't think Steve Ells, I think is his name, he's learning that lesson now, that there's a reason all the other chains use prepackaged stuff from a commissary that is rigorously tested, packaged. That's why you don't hear about salmonella at Subways when they have many, many times more restaurants. What do you think, Alan? I know you were interested in this topic.
I really like the headline as well. I'm still getting this echo from me, Dan, by the way.
Okay, let me lower
But I really like the headline as well because I really think it nails home parts of the point about needing to understand where the real risks are. People are historically notoriously bad at real risk analysis, but you expect people that deal with something professionally to have a better grasp on food safety, and these guys clearly didn't. We were just talking about, populist reaction. Well, what they basically did was they caved in towards populist demands, and now they're paying the price. And honestly, I don't think they learned their lesson. I think they are still going to keep repeating it for quite some time still, because the populist demand is so big and so misinformed. Any thoughts on this one, Kevin or Pam? You mean I'm the only one that gets to touch a controversial subject tonight? Man.
I don't know if it's controversial. I mean, so I read an article the other day um, that Fig and Olive, I think is the name of the restaurant, a kind of a high-end um, chain restaurant,
That was great.
um, actually pre-makes their food somewhere else and ships it to the restaurants. Now, supposedly they're not doing that currently, but that's what their practice was. And I can understand, consistency, brevity. You've got 300 people you need to seat in a night and a small kitchen. And you don't want to pay out the nose for real chefs or whatever. You just need someone who can, boil a bag of whatever. So I understand that part. But if I'm paying $28 for a plate of food, I kind of want it made fresh. And there is a movement. There's a movement to um, farm to table restaurants, where they're locally grown, locally sourced, and
I think
utilizing.
I think the big difference on farm to table restaurants, though, is that they are run by people who care about the broad range quality of the food and also the quality of the animals the animals and materials that go into the food. So they know, many of these farm to table restaurants know exactly where their food comes from. They know how the animals were treated. They know how the vegetables were raised. They know all of these things. And in many cases, they were actively part of doing it themselves. Chipotle is basically trying to source the food at the lowest price as close as they can and get away with it.
Just to clarify, what are they, 300, or now they're 350 miles away, or 550? That's local, and only like 5 or 10% at max has ever been local. And there are problems with local. There are reasons why Tyson can, put out a safer product than maybe your local farm can. I'm not anti-local farm, I'm pro-local farm. But we've learned things, and sometimes it's much more efficient. But I just think a
Well,
lot of this is a scam.
look. So here's the thing. Chipotle has. I don't know. I'm going to guess because I have absolutely no idea. Um, 150 locations in and around the United States. Okay, I don't know if it's higher or lower. And let's say it's relatively fast food, right? And let's say they each serve 50 people an hour or one person a minute. Okay? That's an awful lot of food
Almost
to
2,000.
to get. Oh, see, that's an awful lot of food to get locally sourced and inexpensively. Locally sourced food from small farms, organic farms, and stuff like that is expensive, and it's expensive for a reason. It's expensive because they don't grow in these big corporate farms. It's expensive because not using pesticides means that they have to use other things that are more expensive, and there's a lot more waste. It's a lot more expensive because um, in order to care for the animals and the plants that you're growing, you actually have to put in more time, which means more payroll. So there's a lot of reasons why locally sourced organic food is more expensive, and no one wants to pay $20, $25 for a Chipotle burrito, and that's
Also,
what it would
Pam,
cost.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that's what it would cost if the food at Chipotle was locally sourced and organic. So they're basically paying these large corporate farms to churn out these, GMO food, non-GMO food, sorry. And I think Alan's right. They don't have the care behind it. Someone has. There's a place in Temecula. They do everything locally grown, fresh. And their lunches are quite expensive, and the plates are small. It's not like you're eating a gigantic, big old burrito. It's a little burrito.
I point out that on the complete other side of that, though, you've got McDonald's, for example, who over the years has instituted a massive amount of inspections and making sure that their sources are as good as they can make them. They've spent a lot of time and effort in doing so,
And
the
they
results
have
are generally
36.
pretty good.
Yeah, that's the point. That's my point. So, or one of them is, first of all, organic is kind of a scam. Most people assume organic means not using pesticides. Wrong. It just means you can use organic pesticides, and there's like 20 or 30 you can use. And there's this one guy I saw. I don't know if this is true. One guy said,
and some of those are more toxic than the non-organic versions of them.
they're also used, for example, to kill fish. When someone needs to kill a stream full of fish for some reason, they can use this pesticide that's organic and is able to be used on organic stuff, like organic honey. I mean, can you imagine if you truly to have pesticide-free honey? You'd have to, for miles around the beehive, you'd have to have all organic stuff, right? And that's just not possible. Some people will. This one guy said that again. This is I read it on a whatever, but he said a friend of his grew some organic and non-organic, and the only difference was a single pesticide that he used on the non-organic. But what he would do is he would grow one row of organic and then one row of non-organic, and then every other one, and he would just spray the hell out of one on a windy day, and then of course the pesticides would carry over in the wind to the quote unquote organic. Organic is a scam, and I don't think there's ever been any study to say that GMO foods are bad for you. Quite to the contrary, they probably save lives. It's just people trying to make a buck, and they're trying to scare people, and they're like, just like all these people who are, I'm going gluten free, and they think that makes sense. But to Alan's point, McDonald's has 20 times the restaurants Chipotle does. Chipotle's 1,800. McDonald's has 36,000. So Chipotle, if they're doing locally sourced and your fresh ingredients and it's not run through a central commissary, would you really want to be responsible? You figure there's 10 people at any Chipotle at any given time, that's 18,000 people. If there's 5 people at a Chipotle, if it's a slow day, that's 9,000 people. I would not want to be responsible for worrying that 9 to 18,000 people washed their hands after they took a dump. Because if they didn't and you're dealing with this fresh stuff, you could get a whole bunch of people sick. But you don't hear about these. I'm sure there have been salmonella and outbreaks at McDonald's, but you don't hear. I don't recall ever hearing about it. I'm sure it's happened, but we don't hear about it on this scale. Kevin or anybody else want to weigh in on this? Okie doke. Well, okay. Next is Alan. Can you explain? I guess it was. The first I heard was there was a staffer on Bernie Sanders' campaign. He's, I don't want to say the Donald Trump of the Democratic primary, but he is a populist in a very different vein. He calls himself a democratic socialist, and he's most of the criticism about him is he wants to give a bunch of stuff away, and how are we going to pay for it? That's kind of the rub against him. The rub for him is, he's not on the take, or perhaps not as much as Hillary might be. If you want to be devil's advocate against both. So anyway, he is clearly the populist more popular with the Democratic base than the mainstream establishment Democrats. And one of his staffers apparently, allegedly gained access to some data from the Hillary Clinton campaign. And as a result, the DNC barred them from accessing it. I guess a firewall that was supposed to be up to separate each campaign's data was down for some reason at some point, and so the guy got it. They caught him. This is all alleged, and then they barred the campaign from using it. Then he's filed a lawsuit. Alan, are you up on exactly what happened from the tech angle?
I don't think anyone exactly knows what happened. From what I've been gathering today about this, the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, basically maintains a database of either registered or likely Democratic voters. They maintain this database all the time. They let individual campaigns have access to this data and then also supplement that data with their own information. So, for example, Hillary's committee could have taken, have accessed this data and done a phone survey against some of them in a particular market, say, I don't know, Iowa somewhere. Done a phone survey, and based on the results of that survey, gotten some kind of assessment about whether they were likely Hillary voters, undecided, unlikely voters. They were able to weigh them. So they may have some idea about who they want to make sure gets out to the polls, who they may want to give some more information to, how they want to spin their campaign for them. Having that information in the hands of an opponent might give that opponent information about how they're going to act, where they're going to put their dollars, where they should counter with their dollars, and so forth. So the accusation, as I gather it, is that the Sanders campaign had access to, if you think of it as a database, certain database tables that were owned by Hillary's campaign. They had access to it, and they copied the data, and they were caught doing so. Sorry, the additional part is they weren't supposed to have access to this data.
Correct.
So nobody has said that they did something to break the security. I haven't heard that. What I have heard is that for some reason the security wasn't in place, and they discovered this. Now, I've heard some people say that they reported it. I've heard some people say that they didn't report it and they just spent all of their time grabbing as much data as they could. I've heard a lot of conflicting information on that aspect of it. I believe, however, that Sanders has fired the head of his IT staff over this issue. I'm willing to be correct on that point, but I thought I saw at least one report about that.
I think that's the case, which makes it less sounding like an allegation than, But his suit is not that they didn't do it, because I got the press release from the Sanders campaign. The suit is a breach of contract suit. So it's not like we didn't do it. It's you're contracted to give us access to this data. You can't breach your contract as punishment for some, lone wolf going rogue, which is, I'm sure, how they would characterize it. And then to advance this, and then Kevin, weigh in if you want. This awful DNC chair, Wasserman Schultz, I can't stand her. They're clearly in the tank for Hillary. And it's really interesting because they're the Democratic Party. They should be really Democratic, right, by name. The Republicans seem to be really small d Democratic and not favoring one candidate over another. And so you have like Trump, who's kind of his own thing. You've got the establishment like Rubio and Jeb Bush. And then you've got like the real conservatives like Cruz. And then you've got Libertarian Rand Paul. And none of them are complaining that Reince Priebus is playing favorites.
Sure they are.
Well, I mean, do you think that they're making a case?
I've heard a number of them, especially the ones that are polling fairly low, making that case.
Well,
But
they're
it's a
going to.
pretty hollow argument.
Yeah, but in this case, it's not a hollow argument that Wasserman Schultz is totally in the tank for Hillary. They've had, what, 2 debates so far. I think the second one is tomorrow night, I guess, the Saturday before Christmas. They're weekend debates. Literally, I got from Politico, the press room for the next debate, which is, I think, tomorrow night. The press room is in an ice hockey rink. So the media covering the debate, they told them to make sure you dress warmly because you're literally going to be in an ice hockey rink. And it's going to be freezing to cover the debate. I mean, it could not. It's just absurd. They're totally trying to protect the mainstream candidate and keep the populist candidate from getting any exposure. And from an electability in the general election, clearly Hillary would have a better shot than Bernie Sanders. But that's not the point. It's supposed to be a primary. It's supposed to let them duke it out, let the voters decide. But it's just blatantly Debbie Wasserman Schultz is totally in the tank for Hillary. What do you think about any aspect of this, Kevin?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because the breach definitely happened. Data definitely got accessed by the Sanders campaign, but it seems like the punishment is way stronger than it should be for this incident. Bernie has already fired the head of his IT, who was supposed to be controlling access to all that information. It's not like he's trying to stand behind any of this, but they're pulling his access, and by pulling his access, they're really crippling the campaign in general. And the main reason to do that is to, at least from the perspective of people who are watching, is to make sure that Hillary has some kind of an advantage. So I kind of agree with your assessment that Wasserman is really kind of pulling I'm not saying it's a minor issue, but pulling this issue and turning it from a mistake that can be fixed into let's trip his campaign up. And so this is a problem. I mean, a lot of people are behind Sanders right now. He's had, I think, a little over 2 million people individuals donate to his campaign, which is really huge. I think the last person who did that was Barack Obama. There's a lot of people who are supporting him, and I think that this punishment doesn't fit the crime that happened here. And so it may be what's happening now, but I'm not sure that it's going to help views of the DNC. It seems like it's favoritism.
And no one's going to know because it's these Saturday debates is just nuts. It'll be interesting to see what numbers they get compared to the Republicans, which are like 20 million or something or more. Okay, so there we go. Okay, this crazy story, this plumber, he sold his car, and then they actually, hang on one second. Let me just point this out real quick. I'm going to do a screen share here. I noticed a new feature with the comments. We have live comments. I got this pop-up here. Well, I can't find it now. Here it is. This pop-up here, it says for moderators, it says you can now use a single moderator list for all your live streams and events. Previous moderators have been added automatically. There are currently no moderators. To add a moderator, list a channel username or URL. I have no idea what the hell they're talking about. But apparently there's some new moderator thing for the live comment feed, which is stupid because it disappears after the show's over. And you can't actually comment on the video, which would remain after. I don't like this whole new thing. A rare thing that I want to complain about. But, okay, so this guy sold his car to a dealer. He's a plumber. And he says, well, it ended up in a video with his company name on it and his phone number. And it's just this huge, awful fail. So he was like getting calls and stuff like he was.
Dan, you missed like the one important detail from that.
Okay.
Who made the video?
I don't know. Was it ISIS?
Yes.
Yeah. ISIS made the video. So I'm
You
sure.
didn't say that part though.
Okay, so he sold his vehicle. It ended up on, sold and was shipped overseas. And then this guy posted a photo here of his car being used in Aleppo. And there's his phone number, Mark 1 Plumbing. And so apparently, now your first thought is, what kind of a moron doesn't scrape his logo off the truck? But what he says is he was going to scrape it off, and because I guess he was trading this in for a new vehicle, and the salesman said, "Oh, don't do that. We have a machine that will do it better, and it won't peel the paint off." And so he said, "Okay." And then they neglected to do that. They auctioned it off immediately, and it ended up in ISIS's hands on Twitter with his name, company name, and phone number. So he's suing the dealership. I think he's got a hell of a case if he can prove that.
The only thing I'm shocked about is that he's only suing for $1 million. This is going to completely ruin, if it hasn't already, it's going to completely ruin his business.
I don't think so. I think people aren't that. I mean, they know like your local plumber's not an ISIS guy, and he's gotten a lot of.
Dan, were you about to say that people aren't that stupid?
No, they're definitely that stupid.
Did you not listen to the conversation we had earlier about banning all Muslims?
He's gotten over 1,000 calls to his number with very, very specific threats. Yeah, people have already been reacting to this. So I would definitely think that he would have a case, and I would go for more. It's just ridiculous that they wouldn't take that logo off.
Yeah, if what he's saying is true, that he was trying to take it off, and the salesman stopped him and said, "No, don't do that. You'll ruin the paint. We can do it better. We have a machine." If he can prove that, then you're right. He could get a large amount of money, I would think. But still, you have to prove damages, and it depends on the state he's in. What do you guys think? I forgot to add this, but this is an interesting story. In Virginia, I think it's Augusta County. They closed a county school system.
It was Augusta County. What, are you people freaking nuts down there?
All right, let me intro, and then you can go crazy.
Yeah, no, intro this.
Okay, so in Augusta County, Virginia, there was a school teacher, and I'm a former school teacher, mainly high school, but I had a few middle school students. So she's doing, it's a geography class. So I guess that's what, 9th grade, 9th or 10th, young high school kids. So one of the assignments was on calligraphy and to learn about other cultures. And so there was this thing, it was talking about the Islamic, and explained that in Islam, they're anti-idolatry, so they don't have like statues, like in a Catholic church, you'd have, Jesus on the crucifix, stuff like that. They don't do that. And that's why they get so mad at depictions of Muhammad, some of the folks. So anyway, they do a lot of calligraphy and, pretty colorful drawings on their mosques. So she did the calligraphy saying it's their main tenet of their religion. There's one God, Allah, Muhammad, whatever. I don't know I'm not going to do it justice, but so to practice the calligraphy, to learn about how it works. And so parents got the assignment home and they started freaking out like she's trying to indoctrinate them into Islam. And the lady was trying to teach to the standardized test, which includes this stuff, and she actually got it from a standard workbook. She didn't create it herself. She just got it from a workbook that she had or was given or whatever. And she's totally not trying to indoctrinate anybody. I don't even know if she's Muslim. I don't think so. Her name's I think it's like Cheryl Laporte. She has the same last name as Leo Laporte. Now, they're not related, I don't think. But so it doesn't sound like a Muslim name, but it's just, and then parents were calling, and the police department is freaking, the sheriff's department's worried, they're getting threats, and they ended up closing the entire school system today in the county. And it's not a big county. I think it's like 40,000 people or something. And I could have some of these numbers wildly wrong, but wow, this is crazy.
But the most ironic thing about all this is probably the most that a lot of those parents have paid attention to their kids' curriculum in a long time. Because if they don't know that it's in the standard workbook, then clearly they weren't really paying much attention to what was going on. So good on you guys. Maybe you can check other things in that workbook, like maybe reading and arithmetic and
What did you think?
Find out.
Go
That's
ahead,
a
Alan.
great reaction, Kevin. Absolutely fantastic.
What'd you think?
I almost don't want to say anything else because that was just such a good answer.
What do you think? Just another quick diversion here. The threat that went to L.A. and to New York, and New York was like, "Oh, please, this is a dime a dozen joke threat," and L.A. closed the entire Los Angeles school system. I can't imagine how many tens of thousands of kids or hundreds of thousands.
Let me react to the Virginia one first.
Okay, go ahead.
600,000 students.
Yeah. Second largest school district in the U.S.
Yeah, big deal.
So let me react to the Virginia one. The Virginia school closure, that, this is a case where absolutely nobody did the right thing. Absolutely nobody. The standardized workbook shouldn't have used that phrase in the first place. The teacher shouldn't have given that assignment. The parents shouldn't have overreacted the way they did. And certainly the school district shouldn't have overreacted the way they did. That was just a whole bunch of fail by everybody.
But you think someone like Trump and his ideas are dismissed out of hand as the rantings of a lunatic. But you see this, you realize that there is a large number of people who are truly Islamophobes, especially so fresh after these attacks. It's not a small, tiny, crazy minority of people who are worried about any kind of Muslim stuff.
Well, I think that's because we've had a lot of people who are drumming up, who are beating the war drums and focusing it on and creating this Islamophobia. There is no good reason to do so, though.
And it's not much different than the anti-GMO, the anti-vaccine, and the
no, it's not. And in fact, I would
thing.
say they all stem from very, very similar propositions of people who are, in a lot of ways, have been trained to not think very hard about what's going on.
Yeah, if the thinking is it's in my financial or ideological interest to say this demagogic stuff to advance my cause or line my wallet. It's one of the two usually. Anything else on this wide-ranging topic?
The only thing I would add is that I think the issue with GMOs is a little different than what's going on with the anti-Muslim sentiments, in that it's kind of an overreaction to a lot of fighting that happened earlier with bigger farms about labeling foods GMO or non-GMO. People just wanted to know the difference, and they really fought that labeling for a really, really, really long time.
No,
and now
Kevin,
there's an overreaction against it.
Kevin, no, I disagree. I slightly disagree with you there. I think what it comes down to is people are fundamentally afraid of frankenfoods without having any understanding on what it means, what the impacts are. They will make a lot of statements about GMO foods that are based out of ignorance. And it's not a reaction to, oh, it's Monsanto, it's a big company, they must be doing something wrong. It's because they fundamentally don't understand the issue. Now, I'll be honest, I am in favor of GMO labeling, but I come at it from a very different point of view than other people do. And most people come at it from the attitude of, we want labeling because there is something wrong with GMO. I come at it from the attitude of, I want labeling because I think Monsanto is a sleazy company.
So how do you feel about them fighting it, though, for this amount of time? Because they have been fighting it for a long time. You're not saying it's a good thing that they've been fighting it.
No, like I said, I support GMO labeling, and I think the companies that are opposed to it have come across badly. But the reason why they're opposing it makes sense, because they don't, their argument of you put a label on something, you are in some ways admitting that there is something wrong with it, and there's nothing wrong with it.
But that's not true. I mean, labeling is just labeling.
That means
No,
that means on
labeling.
everything, Alan, everything that has corn syrup in it is going to have a
Yeah.
label that is GMO. That's like saying, there's this restaurant serves food that has sodium chloride in it, which is a chemical used to treat snow on roads.
I've got better one for you.
That's, of course, salt, right? Sodium chloride is a chemical called salt.
Every day you consume chemicals that are used in nuclear power plants. We can equally make statements, but you look at California, for example, just about every building you walk in, just about every restaurant you eat at, just about every product that you buy there has a label on it that says this, whatever, contains chemicals known by the state of California to cause cancer. Just about every building you walk into says that. And that's because there are cleaning agents that are stored there or used there. Now, does that labeling help anybody?
The biggest crime was when the vegetarian lobby or whoever the hell it was went against the wonderful beef talon that McDonald's used to create the best French fries in the world, and fries I should say, because they're not actually French, they're Belgian. Even the French don't call them French fries. But they switched to this shitty oil, and now you can't even get beef talon anymore. But it was way better and it's healthier for you. Just like we discovered all this hydrogenated stuff, which was so much healthier, is actually bad. And then we were told you can't eat eggs because it's bad cholesterol. Then we found out, oh, just kidding. Meanwhile, like egg farmers suffered for decades because of a lie propagated by kooks and spoonbenders. Okay.
Well, and here's part of my point about critical thinking. And this is an issue that, broadly cuts through a lot of things. People will hear things along the lines of bacon causes cancer. And they leap to a lot of conclusions without understanding what that actually means. So it doesn't surprise me that people will say, GMO foods are bad. Well, no. There are issues with GMO foods, but they are probably not the issues that you think they are. Do I think that GMO food should be labeled? Yes, I do. I don't have a problem with that. My problem is that, and I can understand why there's resistance to it, that resistance is going to be that people will see the label that says, contains GMO foods, and they're going to think there is something inherently bad about it. That's the assumption that people are going to leap to, and that's a poor conclusion. Now,
but then why label it? There's no study that has ever shown GMO foods to be any more dangerous than a cow, which is not a real animal, or your house cat, which is not a real animal, or the seedless watermelon, or a tangerine. There's no study that says GMO anything, either whether it's done in a test tube or whether it's done by, getting watermelons with fewer seeds. I mean, there's no studies to show it. It's quackery science. It's quack science. There's no more evidence to suggest that than there is that there are green men on Mars, or that the Earth is flat, or that vaccines cause whatever the hell it was. That crazy
Go
woman.
Pam. Go Pam.
Pam, and then we'll move on to the last topic because Alan's got to go.
There is one study.
Damn it. Oh, we're out of time on this topic.
In which the scientists fed some of this GMO corn to mice, and the mice developed horrible tumors. However, this study was done about a year ago, and I've heard nothing about it since. So I haven't followed up on it, so I don't know. I don't know the conclusion. I don't know if they've done any other studies or whatever. But
Hey,
one
Pam.
of the
Go ahead and finish. I'm sorry.
I was just to say one of the strains of GMO corn that was meant to have an herbicide that is similar to Roundup in it is the one that they used for the study.
I don't know if this is the same one. I'm looking at an article from Scientific American right now, dated November 29th, 2013, with the headline, "Study Linking Genetically Modified Corn to Rat Tumors is Retracted. Publisher withdraws paper despite author's objections, citing weak evidence." So,
That
again,
could be, yeah.
So again, this is a case where I'm not going to say one way or the other, but I am going to point out that, this is where you get big headlines and not understanding the nuances. And, research is about understanding the nuances, and sometimes that takes time.
Well, there was a study back in the 70s about aspartame. I'm guessing that the scientists fed these mice or rats something like 500 times or 50 times the normal ability of the human to ingest, some god awful amount of excess, and they got sick. Now,
can you imagine if they had done it with sugar instead?
Huh?
If they had done it with sugar instead, they would have not fared better than with the aspartame.
Yeah, I mean, they were trying to prove that sweet and low was toxic.
Aspartame or saccharin? You're saying aspartame and sweet and low. So we're talking aspartame, which is NutraSweet, or saccharin,
yeah, it was aspartame.
Which is,
it was NutraSweet.
Okay, the blue packets.
They're trying to prove that it's toxic, and it is toxic in huge doses.
It gives me a headache if I drink a lot of it.
So, I mean, caffeine is, and so is, there's a lot of things. Water, will kill you in large doses. So there has to be some rigor behind this. But, to kind of put a little bit of a spin on it, we eat an awful lot of corn. There's corn in a lot of things. And if someone has a corn heavy diet, it would be nice to know if there's an issue with putting a gene into a plant that makes it naturally produce an herbicide. I can't imagine that something designed to kill a living thing is exactly completely safe.
Isn't every time two mammals mate and produce an offspring that a genetically modified organism?
No. It's a genetically modified organism when something that is naturally occurring is modified from its natural form. So because our genes are screwed up from our environment and stuff like that, there's a field of study called epigenetics, which basically says that future generations are the result of the pollutants and the environmental factors and the even
social factor. I mean, it's not just
and the social factors of the past. It kind of accumulates in the genes, and especially in the reproductive areas of the body.
As I understand epigenetics, and I have a tenuous grasp on it at best, it's not so much that it changes the genes, it changes how different parts of the genes express themselves.
Right. No, exactly. The gene expressions, though, depending on when they're expressed and how they're expressed and in what combinations they're expressed, modifies the organism. So it is a modification. It's an unnatural. Well, I don't know how natural it is. I'm guessing it's natural because evolution. This is kind of how evolution works, right?
Yeah.
So as the multiple generations move on, we are a product of our past.
There's an argument that
basically.
that deformity, which has a negative connotation but shouldn't, deformity can lead. That's what evolution is. That instead of the normal thing, it's something wildly different. And one example, and it could be environmental factors or it could be just coincidence. And to get to what I was getting at, Neil deGrasse Tyson said flippantly, but not really, he said, let me solve this once and for all. The chicken and the egg came first, but it was laid by something other than a chicken. In other words, that the first chicken was a deformity from a prior species and probably laid a few of them and then they made it, and that's how we got the chickens. That's his theory, and I think it's the most plausible theory I've heard. One quick comment, then last I want to get Alan last topic because he's got to roll out. Cybernaut on our previous topic about our Islamic friends, he said, I almost wonder if the rest of the world was having these same conversations during the Inquisition. I would advance that more. That's an interesting comment. Also, remember there was a big before the final solution in Nazi Germany. There was a big meeting where they all discussed what do we do, and they debated all this. That would have been a scary room to be in, but that may be a more apropos example. Not that the Islamophobia of today is leading to that. Okay, last topic here. I want to get Alan real quick, whatever you want to say on this, and then tell us how your week was, and then we can get the rest of you guys on this last one. Ted Cruz has proposed. Ted Cruz is a Texas senator. He's considered a real conservative candidate for the presidency, and he's arguably in like number 2 right now behind Donald Trump. I think he's leading in Iowa in most polls of late. Ted Cruz has proposed a minimum salary of $110,000 for H-1B workers. Now, there are different temporary immigrant visas. An H-1B is a highly skilled person who's coming. It's a non-resident, and it's a 3-year deal, extendable up to 6 years for workers that you, quote-unquote, can't find local people to do it. And that's the supposed test. This became very controversial because, of course, unions hate it because they say it drives down the cost of labor. The most famous example is recently Disney World, Disney Tours hired a bunch of people on H-1Bs to come in at like half the price of the American workers, and the American workers were literally forced to train their replacements in exchange for like another 6 months of salary. That was the poster child for the argument against H-1Bs. So what Ted Cruz is saying is, okay, if you need them, fine. And Mark Zuckerberg and other tech companies have been big proponents of expanding the H-1Bs. I think it's in the tens of thousands, the high tens of thousands, like 80,000 a year, something like that. I could be wrong. Maybe 78,000, something like that. But Ted Cruz is saying a minimum of 110,000, which is about double of what the minimum used to be. Now, this is pretty low for like a Silicon Valley engineer, which would be like about $140. I think the average is 144,000. But for most regions of the country, 110 would be very competitive, if not more than what your typical American employee would earn. Alan, whatever you want to say on this, and then tell us how your week was, and then we'll continue with this with
We
others.
can discuss it. I can hang out a little bit longer.
Okay.
I think this is an interesting proposal. I think certainly we've seen some massive H-1B tech worker abuse in the past few years, and a lot of us in the industry have been saying it, even though the top people in the industry keep wanting more H-1Bs. You know, I don't have a problem with the H-1B tech visa program in general, but we've seen some huge abuse of it. If this stems that abuse, and honestly, I don't think it will all that much, but if this stems that abuse, then I think that's great. Kevin or Pam, you have any thoughts on this one?
I agree with you, Alan. And I think that outside of Silicon Valley and some of the, big names in tech, it actually will stem the abuse. It's highly unlikely that the employees at Disney, for example, were making, $110,000 each. So I do think That's an interesting proposal, and highly skilled labor force. You know, $110,000 is competitive in a lot of cases, and I do think that would help with the issue. I find it interesting that a Republican has proposed it, seeing as they are usually for less government and less control and more free market, and this is definitely not free market.
Well,
So.
but they're not really. Let's be
But
honest here.
it's interesting. What's interesting to me, Alan and Pam and Kevin, is that this is something that Mark Zuckerberg should have proposed, because politically it'd be a steal for them to get a highly skilled, really top line engineer for 110 grand, because they pay their interns 80.
Well, no, but Dan, here's the thing. They don't
still,
want
They
that.
still have to pay. They still have to prove that they can't get workers. So none of the other requirements for the H-1B are going to be nullified by this. That's not just the entry fee.
Also, if
so
they
to
could
speak.
make their workplaces more inviting to females, they would dramatically increase the number of job applicants that they had and the talent pool, because that's a big problem.
Here's the thing that I don't get. I mean, because it is Facebook and Microsoft and Google and Apple that are some of the top companies that are pushing for this. And yet all three of those companies have major international presences. So it's not clear why they're actually trying to bring people into the U.S. under this program. The only reason I can actually think of is that they're trying to bring people into the U.S. under this program because they're able to pay them less.
To suppress wages.
Mm-hmm.
So raising it would still, they're still going to keep claiming they've got a shortage of tech workers. Just now they're going to have to, it's not as big an incentive for them to have that pool in the U.S. They can have that pool at one of their other international centers.
And you can make the argument, and even with the other, I think, is it H1C or whatever, like for migrant farm workers,
there are a number of different programs.
Yeah, so there's others that are just, you could say, well, some American kid. I remember seeing an ad that ran in our paper, and it was for farmhand, and it said 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, right? And I'm thinking, like, they're not going to get some American kid but really, if it was 250 grand a year, they would, right? In fact, all of us would consider picking apples for 250 grand a year.
Yes, but then what would the cost of the apples be?
That's the rub.
There's a reason why Florida tomato pickers are paying illegal immigrants to pick tomatoes, and it's because they keep wanting to drive the price of tomatoes down, because we keep expecting the price of tomatoes to be driven down.
Yeah, it's I don't know what the answer is, but this is a very interesting proposal from a surprising source. I think Alan and I agree on that. Alan, how was your week?
Actually, before we go on, Kevin, did you have any comments on this?
No.
Okay. My week was pretty good. For those of you who haven't seen my notice, there's the Ubiquitous conference from Google coming up in January, and the signups and registration and some more information from it has been released. So if you're interested in the Internet of Things and beacons and Android Wear and wearables and that whole class of stuff, looks like it should be an interesting conference. And if I can find a reasonably priced plane ticket, I'm looking to be out there.
And when is this?
This will be January 11th and 12th in California.
Will you be joining
in San Francisco?
Will you be joining the press pool tomorrow at the ice rink to cover the Democratic debate?
I will not, but that's because I have better things to do with my time tomorrow. Tomorrow, I will be seeing a movie.
Oh yes. Oh my God, I'm so mad. Someone did a spoiler on Facebook.
Dan,
and
if you say one freaking word,
I'm
I am
not. That's
quitting and
my
never
reaction.
coming
I'm
back.
not going to say anything about it. In
I
fact,
saw it last night, Alan. I
Kevin,
can tell you right now.
Kevin, do not say one thing or you are being unfriended so fast.
okay, just one thing that's fair on a scale of 1 to 10, based on what you were expecting. And remember, Alan said that JJ's a terrible director. He's made awful
I didn't
movies.
say JJ. No. I didn't say JJ's a terrible director.
You said all his Star Trek movies sucked.
They did suck.
I think if you're a true Star Trek fan, even a shitty Star Trek movie is amazing because it's better than not having a Star Trek movie. Even the shitty West Wing episodes were great.
Well, that's because those were decent episodes. Star Trek movies sucked shit.
We'll have to
What, you're putting them
company on
above
this.
Star Trek 5? I mean, what do you want?
Okay,
Hell
so
yeah. Look, Kevin. Did you see the preview for Star Trek? Do you really think Star Trek: The Fast and the Furious is even a halfway decent movie?
Yes, absolutely.
No fucking way.
William Shatner upon my screen.
Look, I will take William
Ridiculous.
Shatner.
Denny Crane.
William
Denny Crane.
Shatner any day over absolutely shitty storylines.
I'd take Jar Jar Binks over Star Wars 5. I mean, over Star Trek 5.
Hang
I don't
on.
know about that.
Okay, real quick. What was your I don't want to know any plot or anything. What was your expectation on a scale of 1 to 10 before you saw the movie? What were you hoping for? What were you expecting? Obviously, you were hoping for a 10. You thought it would be a 3?
Are you talking about Alan or me?
Kevin, before
haven't
you
seen the movie
saw
yet,
the
so
Star
I'm
Trek
asking you.
movie,
Okay.
I'm sorry, the Star Wars, before you saw it, and that's how President Obama ended his news conference today. His end of year news conference. He said, "All right, guys, it's time for Star Wars. Have a great day," or something like that. I haven't watched it yet.
No, Dan, you realize why he said that, though, right?
No, I was busy working.
Well, that's because he had invited a number of military kids whose parents were deployed overseas to the White House.
Oh, that's awesome.
To watch the movie.
To justify his government-run movie theater. Bring in the most sympathetic group of kids to watch a movie with you. Kevin, what was your anticipation? What on a 1 to 10 before you saw it? What did you think it would be on a scale of 1 to 10? And then what was it? And no other details, please.
Okay, no details, I promise, Alan. On anticipation level, at the beginning of the campaign, it was probably about a 3. By the time the movie came out, based off of trailers that I saw, it was about an 8 in terms of anticipation. Somewhere between like an 8 and 9. After I saw the movie, it was a 10.
And so it's all the shit we want. It was worth the wait. Okay, cool.
Yes.
And then
I don't know. You know, I'm really trying not to get my hopes up, but my hopes are up because, you know, again, I've seen J.J. Abrams take gold and turn it into shit.
I can quote the Rotten Tomatoes number if you want, or I can not.
What's it at now? 95%?
94%.
But
this
you know,
could
like
be a record. But let me caution everybody
It's not a record,
before you get all excited. The number one movie in the history of the United States and the world is not E.T. or Star Wars or Avatar. It's Gone with the Wind by far. Because if you look at the key metric here is adjusted for inflation, what were the top grossing movies? And Gone with the Wind is like $3.7 billion in 2014 dollars. And then the next is, I forget, Avatar or one of the Star Wars, something, $3.2 billion. And way ahead. And you have to remember that the population was about half.
You ready for the numbers, Dan?
The population of the United States was like 160 million when that movie came out compared to 330 million today. So even though there was like fewer than half of the people on Earth and in the United States, they still are number one. So it'll be a tough time to beat them. Go ahead, Alan.
You ready for the numbers?
Sure.
Okay, highest grossing films adjusted for inflation according to Wikipedia. Number 1 is Gone with the Wind.
3.7?
With 3.4 billion.
Okay, I'm off.
Number 2 is Avatar with 3 billion. Number 3 is Star Wars with 2.8 billion.
But if you adjust for the population, right? Fewer than half as many people. The population of the United States, and what was it, 36 or 38 when Gone with the Wind came out? Maybe 40 something. I don't know. It was right before World War II. And it was
Well, but here's the thing, though, Dan. Gone with the Wind has the advantage of longevity. So that is not worldwide gross from its initial release.
nobody's
That's
watching Gone with the Wind today.
Sure they are. How much do you think that movie makes regularly?
I have no idea. I would guess not much.
I think it's more than you think.
I imagine most of that 3.4 billion adjusted was early on, and then a boost when, and I think also like the re-release of Star Wars, or no, Titanic. Titanic, they don't count the re-release because remember they re-released it in theaters. If they counted both together, it would have fared higher.
Right. Titanic does not count the re-release, but most of the others on the top list do.
But still, I don't like these people say, "Oh, it's because they're doing it for PR purposes, right? To get more people in the seats. Oh, it's the highest grossing opening day." But yeah, because now there's a fee for 3D, which you didn't have. There's an IMAX fee. There's more theaters, more people, and they're battling an experience at home with a nice sound system and a large 4K television that frankly rivals a movie theater. And some shooter's not going to come in your living room and gun down you and your friends. Which is something I actually thought about. You can't bring a gun. Maybe I'll sit by the door. Even though it's a completely irrational fear, I probably have a greater chance of getting killed by a falling coconut than some shooter in a movie theater. But it's something you think about. The terrorists have won. Kevin, how was your week? And anything else you want to say about any of this?
Okay. Week was good. It was busy. A couple things wrapped up. Looking forward to the holiday season coming up next week. And in terms of Google and Android products, still examining this Project Fi. It's okay. I have had a couple of issues. I had an issue with it last night where I was trying to get some signal, and it seemed to be having a problem shifting between Wi-Fi and regular networks. So it still feels like a little bit of early days in terms of how well it performs. But in general, it's been okay. In terms of Google products, I like the fact that they had an option to choose some kind of Star Wars additions to some of the Google products. So if you had a map and you chose a side on for Star Wars, instead of having an arrow that you follow around for your navigation, you could have a TIE fighter or an X-Wing. You would follow the TIE fighter or the X-Wing, and on YouTube having that lightsaber bar. That was really cool as well. And yeah, I did see the Star Wars movie. I don't know when I'm going to see it again, but I'm probably going to see it again in theaters. Probably in I didn't see it in IMAX, so I'll probably see it in IMAX.
It's very hard to find an IMAX, a real one. You know what I mean? Because they're licensing their technology or whatever to smaller theaters, and there's no way, because it's not in their interest to tell you like the real big ass, like you'd see at a big museum in a big city, the original large IMAXs. Some of them are very small, and they're still charging that price. So I wish there were a way to find like a review of various IMAX theaters in the area, and I imagine it'll be quite a wait to get in for Star Wars.
Yeah, I may have to wait a little bit, but it's worth it.
So a question for you before I go to Pam. Alan and I both scored a free Star Wars themed. I got R2D2. I think you did too, Alan, right?
No, I went for BB-8.
Okay, so I got R2D2, cardboard special. It was free. My question is, I got the package. I've not opened it. I actually left it at the Postal Business Center locally by accident, but they know me and I'll get it tomorrow. open it and use it and enjoy it?
Yes!
Or do I keep it in the original packaging and try to eBay it later?
Oh, for fuck's sake.
No, just go ahead and use it. Those days of being able to collect that stuff, those are pretty much over. People are hip to collectible stuff, so just go ahead and use it and enjoy it.
Go ahead and say something out so we can see how good
I took
is
mine
it.
out of my package already.
Is it badass?
I'm showing it on the screen right now.
How is it?
It's a cardboard.
I mean, it works. I've never used one.
Yeah, it works fine. By the way, Dan, I just looked it up. So Gone with the Wind, when it first came out, netted $32 million. Adjusting $32 million for inflation does not come anywhere near what the current take is, what films currently take.
Okay. So there's that. Probably I'm still right either way.
Yeah, but still.
They can't possibly have increased their gross in 7 years. Pam Adger, how was your week?
Miserable.
Talk about a buzzkill.
Sorry, I had migraines all week long. It was pretty bad. I don't know why, but I'm actually glad that tomorrow's the 19th because that's when I can re-up my Emitrax prescription, and I only get 9 pills a month, so I've gone through them all, so that's 9 migraines.
I saw a news story
that's
that
a
they were
lot.
on the verge of a cure for that of some sort.
That sucks, Pam. That really sucks. I hope you're feeling better.
It really, really does suck, and I'm really, really looking forward to a cure. But I do count myself lucky because, for the most part, I can function with them. Except for a couple of days a month where I really have to crawl into a dark cave. But yeah, I didn't get them till I was over 40. So there's a hormonal component, but I just don't. As far as we can tell, there's nothing that triggers them that I can predict. So I just have to endure. Maybe menopause will finally get rid of them. I don't know. So.
Well, I hope you feel better, and I hope they come up with a cure.
I feel fine
point.
today, but yesterday I didn't, and the day before, you know what I mean? So it was just been a tough week for me. So luckily I'm on vacation till after Christmas, so at least I get to lay around the house and, that kind of stuff. But so.
Okay. Hope you feel better. And then Cy has a really amazing, a couple comments here. He said living causes cancer. Look into the story behind HeLa-Cells. Radiolab, it'll blow your mind and change the way you think about cancer. I think he's talking about the lady who they just look it up, HeLa cells, and the story there. It's a fascinating story, and somebody wrote a book about it, but it was actually a cancer patient, and the cells just would not die, and they've kept them going to this day, like decades later. If you've never heard the story, it's a must read. Check that out. And also here is a post.
Well,
go ahead, Pam.
Real quick. Cancer cells are immortal by definition. That's one of the they turn off the cell death signals. So they are immortal in that way. So that was the breakthrough, was to get them not to die outside of the body, but inside the body they're very difficult to kill. So.
And that was what was unique about this and the breakthrough. And
yeah.
the interesting part of the story is this woman, her tumor, or whatever they removed, it was without her knowledge or consent, or the family's consent, was grown for scientific purposes and study, and is now all over the world in labs and classrooms. And the descendants of this woman who was the original donor, are not. I mean, they don't want to be anti-science and learning, but it's a big ethical dilemma, and it's a fascinating story. So, Google HELA cells as one word, HELA, and if you've not heard this, if you've not read the story, you should. So here this is really amazing. So Cy, a great friend of our show. Sometimes you never know what you may come across in your day. If the story behind this camera is true, it was used to film parts of Gone with the Wind. So here we go. It's a Kodak. And I'll just go through here.
Where are you getting the comments?
This is a comment on the Google Plus Week page, which obviously will get some editing in January. Kodak 400-foot film chamber for Kodak reflex special camera made in Rochester, New York. And then this is amazing. Yeah. My God, your phone might do justice against this thing. Incredible. But anyway, my week was hectic and trying to get the paper out and everything. But looking forward to a massive amount of food on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And seeing my nieces.
There's not going to be a show next week, right?
Say again?
There's not going to be a show next week?
Well, it's Christmas night, so probably not. So this may be our last show of 2015. If I do anything, it'll be, hanging out, BSing or whatever. We'll play it by ear, but I wouldn't look for one. But anyway, I'm going to see the movie. And I hear, I couldn't be more pleased. I'm a J.J. Abrams fan. I was a big Lost fan, and not just because of Kate. I was a big, and I even liked the ending of Lost, which it was a very controversial and not well-liked ending. So I'm a true fan. And I like good scripted stuff. So I'm like anybody, Star Wars is, oh my God. So anyway.
Okay, if you give any spoilers, someone's going to hurt you, so don't do it.
I'm not going to do spoiler. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, okay.
I could make something up.
Yeah, I'm the one who had to be careful, Pam. I have seen it, but no spoilers.
Jar Jar was secretly the emperor the whole time. I could make some stuff up, Anyway, and The Onion had some really good stuff. One of my favorites was Vladimir Putin likes to start every morning writing the day's news or something like that. Anyway, thank you all for watching. It's been a great 2015. I look forward to a great 2016. All kinds of exciting things to happen. And we'll be here covering it in our unique way. And we hope you'll watch despite our covering it in our unique way. No, seriously, thank you all. Have a wonderful Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever you're into. And we will see you typically on Fridays. We may not do it next Friday, this coming Friday, because it's Christmas night. I may be hopefully in a carbohydrate-induced coma after a wonderful meal with my family. But anyway, until we meet again, we'll see you and have a wonderful holiday season. Thanks.